This podcast is audio only, so this video is only going to be a graphic. Hope you enjoy the show.
Death has come to your little town, Sheriff.
Have you ever felt a knife cut through human flesh and scrape the bone beneath?
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Be my victim.
You are all my children now.
Hello, my name is Austin Torres, and welcome to the Would You Die podcast, the show where we talk about our favorite horror monsters and villains. Today, I am joined by a prolific creator in the horror community. He is the host of the Horror Countdown podcast. You can find his film reviews on Don's World of Horror and Exploitation, and he is constantly sharing and uplifting other horror creators. I think it's the coolest thing. This dude's awesome, and honestly, just an honor for me to welcome to the show, Don Anelli. How are you doing today?
Screonk, everyone. How's it going? A little joke for later on tonight, but if you've read the episode title, you know what that's in reference to. But it's an honor to be on here, and I'm definitely glad that we got together to do this because I'm really excited about it. And from our past interactions, this is going to be a lot of fun. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Oh, yeah. And in case you guys haven't read the title description, we're talking about the biggest monster ever, both literally and I'd say at the box office, like iconically, you know, it's the big G. It's the king of the monsters. We are talking about Godzilla.
Yep. I'm really excited for this one. I mean, like I said, based on our past interactions, this is going to be a lot of fun and one of my favorite topics to discuss of all time. So this is going to be great.
Oh, yeah, I agree. But before we start talking about the big G, what I'm really curious is, like, as I mentioned, you do so much in like the horror world and you're constantly sharing, and with people like you, it really feels like a horror community. What kind of set you off on this horror path? Because I think it's pretty obvious you're a fan.
Yeah, what do you mean? You think I like this blood and guts crap? Oh, fuck off with that. So yeah, I guess my horror journey would be kind of unusual for a lot of people. I would assume that if you interviewed 100 people, at least 90 to 95 of them would say either my parents were fans or my older brother was a fan. And, you know, I rated their movie collections and did, you know, one thing led to another. And I'm watching Exorcist at 9 years old or, you know, something similar to that. Or, you know, maybe you stumble down in the middle of the night to, you know, get a drink of water and you see Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Night of the Living Dead on TV and, you know, you're transfixed or traumatized or, you know, one of those two. And, you know, you became a fan ever since then. I didn't really follow that route. I kind of was, and I say this just because it's not necessarily a term that I'm really familiar with. It was almost like I was pushed against it by my family. I can't say I grew up in a religious family, but I grew up with a very heavily religious influence in my background. If you haven't guessed by my last name, my family is very heavily Roman Catholic. And that was always like a very big, you know, I guess like a looming influence over me, which was to, you know, see a bunch of, you know, violence and blood and gore. And, you know, you see films being promoted based on, you know, massacres and, you know, people being ripped to pieces and seeing images that'll make your blood freeze or, you know, stuff like that. It was very, very, I wouldn't say forbidden because that was never the case, but it was just very heavily made it clear that that wasn't the way that I was supposed to be like a righteous and generous person and to, you know, be like a good standing member of the community. And it was always something that I never really pushed back against. As at that age, it was, again, and this is kind of like the weird thing to mention, but I didn't really see much point in pushing back against my parents because a lot of the stuff that I grew up with, they proved right. So, don't touch the stove, it's hot. And, your dumbass touches the stove and, you burn your fingers and they say, well, I told you. And, it's like, okay, yeah, you were right. Okay. So then, you listen to them about stuff like that. Don't look both ways before you cross the street. And, what happens when, your basketball or baseball runs across the street and you almost get run over? They say, look both ways before you cross the street. What did I tell you? And it was just kind of like an accumulation of stuff like that, where if, my parents said not to do something, I didn't rebel against it because I assumed they were right. So my parents telling me, don't watch, stuff like that, it's bad for you. It kind of just made sense for me not to do it. So I kind of steered away from that. And it wasn't until I was in my teens where, and this is going to sound kind of weird, but in my teens, I really developed into being like an action movie fan. And I was like really heavily into, like the late 80s, shoot 'em ups kind of stuff. I mean, I knew Lundgren, Stallone, Van Damme, Schwarzenegger. I mean, even like the, lower tier guys like Seagal and Olivier Grenier and, guys like that, that was kind of like my wheelhouse when I was growing up. And just as a weird coincidence, I believe me, I still keep track of this because I still have I don't have it on me, but I remember seeing this a few years ago where I had a calendar where I kept track of all the movies I watched. And within like the space of like maybe like a calendar month or two, Predator, RoboCop, Total Recall, Blade, Deep Rising, Pulp Fiction, and I think there's maybe like one or two others. And it was like, just bang, 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 like all these like, hyper violent, ultra graphic, bloodshed filled kind of action films. And it was just this weird thing where it was kind of like, why am I not watching horror movies if that's what they're based on? Like, if my parents said, don't watch all that, graphic and violent stuff, then, why am I watching this and I'm totally fine? So it was just kind of like a curiosity thing. And it took me a while. I can't say I immediately became a fan, but I've always, and this is going to, date me more than anything, but it wasn't until Bride of Chucky came out. And that to me is like the first film that was kind of like, oh, okay, well, maybe there's something here. Maybe there's more to horror than I thought, because I wasn't really a fan of a lot of the stuff I had seen beforehand. And it was Bride of Chucky that was kind of the one that, launched me into being a horror fan. And, it was kind of like, touch and go. I was, action movies. I was into, horror, kind of like, it was like 1 and 2 kind of. And probably by the time I hit my early 20s, it was kind of more like, horror started getting further and further up, and I was watching more and more. And I would probably say it's probably been for like maybe like the last decade plus, where horror is like 98% of what I watch. I'll cleanse the palate with a, martial arts or kung fu movie or two, and, like a Godzilla movie or something like that. But at least like maybe 98% plus would be horror films and, other stuff like that. And it's been like that for, like I said, maybe about a decade now.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't want to say I had a similar horror origin, but there is something similar in which we both had a very heavily Catholic upbringing. And I wonder if, I don't know if I got any Catholics listening to this right now, and you may agree or disagree, but I think there's a lot of horror in like the Bible.
Yeah.
And like and like anyone who's seen Passion of the Christ, like that's a very horrific film.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I mean, for me, because like I said, I was more of like the Roman Catholic version. I think, I don't know if that was kind of, I mean, I've never really studied the differences between the two, and it would actually be interesting to like, compare like the different versions and, offshoots and stuff like that. But yeah, at least in as much as what I remember, like it was very, very, very heavily, like they used fear as not like an intimidation tactic, but like a teaching tool, where don't do that, you'll end up in hell, or you'll end up in purgatory or something like that, where it wasn't really like they put the fear of God in you, but it was more like, just don't do that and you'll be fine. Like that was really kind of like what it was like growing up, where, like I said, you're not using it to like, scare the crap out of you, but it was more like, if you don't do it, you're fine. So, just don't do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if that sort of upbringing inadvertently creates horror fans. Because because I went to Catholic school, and a lot of kids I went to Catholic school with, who I'm still friends with, we all like horror movies. And I'm like, there's like some Catholic vibes in movies like The Exorcist and The Conjuring. So I wonder if there's like kind of like this kind of subversive. I don't know. I just think there's a line between growing up Catholic and into becoming a horror fan, which I think is interesting.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's not like we were like lapsed Catholics in the truest sense, but it was still more like the teachings were still very much there. And the mindset was still very, very, very heavily and very strongly imposed throughout my childhood. So yeah, it
For
was
sure.
yeah, it was never really a sense where it was like, okay, Sunday morning, let's head to church and that kind of stuff. But it was always, just be the proper person, be, the kind, generous person, and, do the right thing and you'll be fine. But yeah, like yeah, it was still very much like, something I still remember very prominently from my childhood.
For sure. Do you remember when you first saw Godzilla?
I do. So this would be, I was actually into Godzilla earlier. Godzilla predates horror movies by a substantial degree. And in fact, Godzilla actually introduced me to the concept of movies.
Oh, nice.
Kind of a shock to go from like Thomas the Tank Engine and Reading Rainbow and Sesame Street to, well, my first movie wasn't really Godzilla. It was actually Rodan.
Okay.
But yeah, it's same thing where it was kind of like a just surreal experience, and I still remember vividly because it was a case where I had stumbled upon the movie Rodan through this project that we had done from school. We were given this assignment. It was I believe it was third or fourth grade. I always say third, but I maybe it's fourth. I don't remember. But we were given this assignment where we had 10 questions on the sheet. We were supposed to use that as an outline to interview our parents with. And we were supposed to ask them questions, and then we were supposed to provide answers ourselves as to how we would answer the question. Stuff like, what did you do on the weekends? What were your favorite snacks? What would your favorite subjects in school? Stuff like that. But the whole point of it was to teach you how to do a compare and contrast essay, because you were to take a couple of answers from your parents and contrast them with how you answered the question. So it's like, getting you into like writing essays and like comparing and contrasting stuff. So my dad was, my dad's a little bit older than a lot of people my age, their parents were. So he actually grew up in like the 50s and 60s, whereas a lot of like my parents, the parents of my schooling, they were like late 60s, early 70s. So my dad was always like at the drive-ins. So he was like really big into that. And like I said, one of the things on the, he'd like do on the weekends was, he'd go to the beach all day, and then, he'd relax and go to the drive-in. And he started naming off movies, and he mentioned, like a lot of the 50s and 60s classics. All the Harryhausen stuff, all the, 50s sci-fi giant bug movies. And you're yeah, exactly. I mean, you're seeing like, Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, Jack the Giant Killer, It Came from Beneath the Sea, 20 Million Miles from Earth. And then all of a sudden it's just like, you pops Rodan in there. And it's kind of one of those where it's like, okay, that one kind of sticks out just because it's so bizarre from all the other stuff. And he said, it was something like, I don't remember much about it. It was just something like a giant dinosaur or something. And to like a 6-year-old, it's kind of like one of those with like, key buzzwords. It's like, ooh, I want to see that. And so that led to, me tracking it down. And I remember, because it was on cable TV one time, and my grandmother had cable, we didn't. So I had asked her to tape the movie for me, and I remember getting the tape back when, after it was shown. And I remember sneaking down into like the middle of the room, like the living room in the middle of the night, and putting the tape on, and not trying to like let anybody know what was going on. But I still remember vividly just like the way like my face was hurting, just smiling, being engrossed in everything that was happening. And it was kind of like this, it's one of like the prominent images and like the things in my head that I don't know if I'll ever really forget. And it wasn't very much longer after that I saw Godzilla. And I don't have a traditional one as like my first Godzilla movie. It's Terror of Mechagodzilla, actually. That was That was the
Nice.
first one. Yeah, I had seen images because they were hyping up the showing of the movie because it was one of those, and I still have this to this day because I didn't want to tape over it. I still have it to this day, and it was TNT Saturday afternoon Monster Vision. It wasn't the Joe Bob stuff; it was the Saturday afternoon matinee stuff. And they had several Godzilla movies. They had the original. They had Mothra versus Godzilla, or Godzilla versus the Thing, Godzilla versus Monster Zero, and they had Godzilla's Revenge and Terra Mecha Godzilla. So I did get to see him through that, but it wasn't until Mecha Godzilla came out, I think 2 or 3 weeks later, when I first actually remember seeing him. And if it, may give a little spoiler here, that's kind of one of the reasons why I brought him up on our show, that movie specifically. How I feel about that, but I think that's one of the just greatest entrances I've ever seen. Just the first time you see him on camera, and like I said, it was the first time I had seen him personally, and it was just like, oh my god, like this guy just looks awesome. And the movie's not really one of my favorites, but it just holds so much sentimental value to me just because of that. And seeing him in action for the first time, and it's a film where he's the good guy, so it was kind of like one where I was like always on his side, like rooting for him. And you build him up, and you have the battle with the two monsters in the film, and you see him like how he's struggling, and he wins the first fight when the Titanosaurus retreats. And then, the second fight, Titanosaurus and Mechagodzilla beat him. And then he has that triumphant return in the second act. And, it's a Godzilla movie, so I'm not going to say it's a spoiler to, announce that he won at the end. But it was one of those where I was like on his side, and I was like triumphing, and I was like rooting him on. And I still remember like being excited when, you see him, blows the Mechagodzilla remains up, and he wins the day and all that. And like I said, it's been one where I recognize the movie's not the greatest now, but just the nostalgia of seeing that, and seeing that he was, this big imposing guy. He looked really cool. Like, I didn't know it was a guy in a suit, but he had the great look, he had the great presence, he did the right thing, and he was the good guy. So it was one of those where just I kind of like latched onto him, and that was one where I kind of like fell in love from there. And I think like the week after was the original, so it was kind of like a little shocked to see him like be the bad guy, but it was just one of those where I think it just clicked, and he's been a part of me ever since.
That's awesome. I love how it's like it's truly love at first sight.
Yeah, I jokingly said this, and it's not too far off, but I have said that he's raised me as much as my parents have, just with the amount of time I've, watched his movies, and, like how long he's been around in my life. Cause I'm like 6 or 7 years old, maybe a little bit older, but like at that age, when you see something and, it just sticks out, and it's like that impressive, like that, it just stays with you. So like I said, he's kind of like been one where, like he's been involved, and he's kind of like, raised me as much as my parents have. So.
That's awesome. So it wouldn't be too wrong to assume that you have a great appreciation and nostalgia for the Showa era of Godzilla.
Yeah. This is, I would say, early 90s. So we're thinking like 93, 94, 95. The Heisei's around, but I'm not aware of it. At this stage, I'm just more aware of like what's on TV. So
right.
I managed to, dig around, and I'd find, King Kong versus Godzilla, or Ghidorah the three-headed monster, Destroy All Monsters, and I, like a couple of the other 70s stuff, but it wasn't where like the Heisei hadn't come out to America yet officially. And it wasn't until I discovered G-Fan. I think I actually still have a lot of the issues when I was subscribed to that. So like 94, 95-ish was when I first got wind of that. And that is what led me to realizing the Heisei era was around, and a lot of the other like incidental stuff, because I wasn't really aware of any other giant monster movies. The only ones that I was really aware of was, like I said, Rodan was one. I'd seen Mothra, and probably, Frankenstein Conquers the World and War of the Gargantuas were like the only ones that I really knew of. And it wasn't until I looked them up, and you saw Mysterians, and King Kong Escapes, Dogora, and
Yeah.
a lot of the other stuff that it kind of started like filling in the blanks, and made me aware of like not just Godzilla, but Gamera, because I had no idea who he was. Other stuff like Yongari, Reptilicus, Gorgo. That was probably like right when I like really started exploring that, and like that was kind of like the two punch of like the stuff that I was into, which was you get your giant monsters, and then you get your action movie stuff. So that was kind of like my childhood was mostly that, where one weekend I'd be renting Gappa the Triphibian monster, and then the next weekend I'd be on a Dolph Lundgren kick. But that was kind of like my childhood.
I love that. I can relate because I also had a childhood dominated by Godzilla. Godzilla was one of my favorites growing up. I'm a little younger than you, but I remember when I was little, some people still get mad when this movie's mentioned, but I'm going to mention it anyways. The 98 American Godzilla with Matthew Broderick. I was like 4 or 5 when that was coming out. So I remember like the marketing push. I remember the Taco Bell commercial with the Chihuahua going like, "Yo quiero taco." No. I mean, he said that, but it's the one where he's like, "I think I'm going to need a bigger box."
Yeah.
And like all that shit. I mean, toys were everywhere. I had a little Halloween costume. But my true nostalgia really comes from, well, I had my mom got me a VHS of Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. I watched that. Yeah, you had Terror of Mechagodzilla. I had Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. And I don't remember if it's the first one I've seen, but I do remember it's the VHS one that I had, that in the 98 version. And I had a few others on DVD, but but the order in which I watched the Godzilla movies, I don't remember.
Yeah, same
Common
here.
Sense says it would be Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, but I don't know. That was in the early days of DVDs, so I'd go back and forth between, that was back in the day when the machines had both VHS and DVD players, and those, I mean, that was cool. So it wasn't that hard to go back and forth, but I had a box set of Godzilla movies. I had the original. You might have had the same box set too at some point, because I think it was really popular. But it had the original Godzilla. I know it had Mothra versus Godzilla. I believe it had Son of Godzilla, Terror of Mechagodzilla, and I believe Rodan are the ones in this box.
It sounds familiar. I had a couple sets on VHS. There was one I had that it was Sea Monster, Son of Godzilla, Godzilla versus Gigan, and Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. That wasn't one of the first ones I got, because I picked up a couple. I picked up a couple on VHS before that, and then that was like the big set that I had.
Oh, you know what I did have too was I had a DVD of King Kong versus Godzilla, and that one was on a pretty good heavy rotation. I loved that movie.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I think I had a few myself growing up. I think I had the big DVD set. I want to say it was Media Blasters, but it's too far away and I don't want to interrupt the set just to go grab them. But it was the DVD set with the original, and it had the Japanese version with the American. Godzilla Raids Again, Mothra versus Godzilla, Ghidra, Monster Zero, Raids Again, and Terror of Mechagodzilla. So I ended up with like 3 different copies of that one, because I still had the VHS version that I taped off of Monster Vision. So yeah, those were like the big sets I remember getting, because I remember we had the VHS first, and then when we upgraded to DVD, we had to like go back and rebuy everything. So that's when I went ahead and I got, I guess, the Media Blasters or whatever set that is, the one that has all the older dubs, because I know the new Criterion one doesn't have the old dubs, because they have because they have the international versions, because that has the Japanese versions with the new dub on it, so it's not the American re-edits, because I know I know the U.S. re-edited Raids Again. We re-edited Mothra because Mothra has the missile attack on that the American Navy does. That's not in the Japanese version.
Right.
And yeah, because that one's different. And then I think they tweaked. I don't think it was a major change, but I think they tweaked Ghidra a little. Ghidra was tweaked a little, and then I think the other one that had it was Monster Zero because they switched the theme song out. Because if you watch the Japanese version, they have the bouncing like jaunty theme, like it's the one that they play at the end with the military when they're putting their plan into action and they're attacking the saucers.
Mm-hmm.
When their tanks are playing and you got all like the sci-fi stuff going on, that theme is playing in that sequence. That's playing over the opening credits. But then when the American one came out, they replaced it with that creepy little sci-fi thing that they play when they arrive on Planet X.
I gotcha.
Yeah, and then I think in the 70s, Gigan got edited down because of the violence.
Yeah, isn't that the first one where Godzilla bleeds?
Yeah, I think I don't remember if he did in Hedorah. I don't remember if he did because I remember the sequence where he goes to punch it and he pulls his hand out and his hand's smoking. Because that was during I think it's the fight in the city. I think that's the first or second time that they fight. I think he goes to punch him and his hand goes through it and he pulls it out and his hand starts smoking. So I don't know if that would count, but I think like definitive blood loss, I think it is Gigan. Because there's the one where during one of the flybys, when Gigan goes with the buzzsaw, he hits him in the shoulder and you see that huge spurt come out.
Yeah.
And then, he hammers him again with the claws and he draws the blood from the forehead. And
he gives him a little bonk.
Yeah, he gives him a couple bonks. And then I think Anguirus gets it too, where they actually did it so hard that it actually splattered over and hit the camera. So, yeah, I remember that one being all cut out. And then Megalon was also another one that they edited out because there was a lot of... Well, I guess they should say that there was some adult magazines in the film pretty frequently. So, yeah, that one was edited down. I believe both Mechagodzillas were slightly edited as well. Because I know Terror of Mechagodzilla was another one that was very, very heavily edited because they did... There's one version which is on the DVD version that I didn't see on the Criterion one where they added this bizarre intro where they kind of like do this recap of Godzilla's adventures, but they take all these various it's kind of like a Godzilla's Revenge thing where they take like snippets from all these various films and they try to piece it together to show Godzilla's history. And he goes from like this destroyer and, this being that's there to just wreak havoc and destroy everybody. And then he kind of like becomes a protector and it kind of like goes back and forth. It kind of like explains his history. And then it crashes into, the repeat of Mechagodzilla to like bring you back up where it's the battle with the revealed Mechagodzilla and the finery and then the final battle at the end. And then I can't remember if there's anything in Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, but like I said, I know Terror Mechagodzilla was also very heavily edited. So I remember having all of those on the DVD sets, but then I don't know why they're not like included on the Criterion set, but I at least have the old school versions on DVD that still have the old dubs. They still have the old cuts and the old edits. So yeah, that's always been. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it'd be funny if they didn't really edit down Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, but they edited down Godzilla versus Gigan. Because I think personally, Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla is way more violent than Godzilla versus Gigan.
Like I said, it's been like 20 some odd years now. So I'm really going off of memory here. I think a couple of the edits were just the apes when they get shot, when they're humans and they get shot. I think those are edited. And then maybe a few scenes of the final battle when he's just spurting blood like a fountain off the side. That particular shot may have been edited, but I don't think it was completely cut. Because I do remember when I remember watching it for the first time, I do remember seeing him being bloody.
Oh, I remember when Mechagodzilla is still in the Godzilla disguise and he tears poor Anguirus' tongue out.
Yeah. Yeah,
That
I remember that as well. Yeah.
that was brutal. Still, I mean, what I don't know why I'm saying was that is brutal.
I don't remember where in the order I saw that one, but I remember being just like, oh my God, wow. But it was
Yeah.
always weird. The thing is that I can always remember thinking it's not Godzilla. It's not Godzilla. He's not going to do that because they never changed the roar. And they still keep the Mecha Godzilla roar on him. And even at
Yeah.
a young age, I still remember that distinctly because it was always, wait, Godzilla doesn't sound like that. And you hear that, just like rhythmic clomping, and it was like, that's not Godzilla. So it was always like one of those where I do distinctly remember thinking that wasn't Godzilla, that was, I didn't know it was a robot, but I knew that wasn't the original Godzilla. And I thought that
Yeah.
was, I mean, like the title is not going to give it away, like, you dumbass, but it was always one where it's like, okay, I know that's not Godzilla. Is he going to come in and he's going to, fight the, imposter, which, I mean, he does, but it was always one of those where it's like, okay, that's not Godzilla. That, is it going to be one where, like he's going to have to, team up with this other version of himself? Because
Right.
you remember like the prophecy where it's like, the two monsters, and it's like, King Caesar is like a complete non-factor, but it's like, okay, the two monsters, is that going to be two versions of Godzilla, and he's going to have to like get this other version that just beat the crap out of his friend? Is he going to have him come in and like, try to team up and, face down Mecha Godzilla? And like, how is this thing gonna like impact on the storyline and all that? I do remember thinking that, because I was always aware, like there was always just I remember distinctly that it was never really Godzilla, because there was always like just too many weird things, like like the roar, the clomping. It was never really like imprinted in my head like that's Godzilla doing that, like that's Godzilla doing that. It was always one of those where I was always kind of like aware that that's not him.
Yeah.
And then when the real one shows up, it was kind of like, oh, well, okay, yeah, thank God. And then they do the reveal, and it's like, okay, he was the robot all along. It's like, yeah, like I said earlier, like the title doesn't give it away, but I do distinctly remember that.
I just remember being like, damn, God, because I think it had me fooled, but I remember that was one of the first ones I saw. I don't think it was the first one I saw, but I do remember it was being one of the first. And I just remember being like, damn, Godzilla, that's his tongue. He needs that.
Like I said, it did take me a couple of viewings to realize that he didn't pull his tongue out. He actually just dislocated his jaw.
That's still pretty nasty.
Yeah, like I said, yeah, it was one of those, because I was like you. I actually did think that he did pull the jaw out, because he has like that whimpering cry when he's like scampering back to the hole. So it's like, did he rip the tongue out? Because like the hand's close to it when he goes to grab, like when he slams him down, and then he like grabs his head and tries to yank him. Like you do see like the thumb like really close to it. So it's kind of like, did he really? And it did take me a few takes to realize, oh, he actually just pulled his jaw apart. But yeah,
I thought it was the tongue coming out, but I haven't seen it since I was a kid.
Yeah, like I said, I thought that too, and it took me a while to realize that he actually just dislocated his jaw. That's what he did. I mean, yeah, it's still pretty graphic, but yeah, no, I was with you. I did think that he did pull the tongue out, and it wasn't until I'd seen it maybe 2 or 3 other times after that I realized he did. He actually just dislocated his jaw and like yanked it to the side.
Yeah. Trying to think of some of the other Godzilla movies, because I didn't have too many growing up, but I did have what I thought were bangers, and I still do. I still think they are bangers. But in like DVDs, kind of like one-off DVDs, I remember I had King Kong versus Godzilla, which
nice,
absolute banger. I had Godzilla 2000, which I remember my mom took me to go see in theaters, and then I had Godzilla Tokyo SOS.
Yeah, I remember I had, other than 2000 I had on VHS. I had that one on, that was like the last one I bought on VHS. But I actually had the Millennium series on DVD. I don't remember, did I may have had GMK. No, it was Mega Girth that I didn't have. Mega Girth was the only one I didn't own. But I had GMK, the 2 Mega Godzilla ones, and Final Wars on DVD. I do remember having those, because I remember Final Wars had that 20-minute little behind-the-scenes stuff where they're like on the set, and like they're showing like the battles with the Kumonga, and I think it's the I don't remember if it's the Rodan attack on New York or if it's the sequence when he arrives and he's rampaging just before the fight with Kaiser Ghidorah. I don't remember which one, but I do remember seeing like some of the sequences where they're showing like the behind the scenes with the City of Destruction and they're like preparing for the battle and stuff like that. But yeah, I remember having GMK and then the two Mechagodzilla ones and then Final Wars on DVD. But Godzilla 2000 was the last one I do remember buying on VHS because I had that one. I had that one on I remember that one was like the last one I bought because it was like one of those where Suncoast was going out of business. The one that was near me was going out of business, so I like stocked up and bought like all of the stuff that they had there. And that was one. And I think I had a couple of the Heisei ones as well, because I remember having a 2-pack with King Ghidorah and Mothra, the 90 versions. I remember having those. And I believe I also had Destoroyah as well. Oh, and Violente. Violente, I remember getting that one as well. So I had all of the... So I had like pretty much most of the Heisei ones on VHS, and then I had the Millennium ones on DVD, which was... kind of weird, but at least it filled in all the gaps, I guess.
Yeah. What are your feelings on the current era of Godzilla?
Let's see. We'll go in order. I like the MonsterVerse. I don't love it. I enjoy the 2014 one, but I do think that there are a lot of issues with it. I do want to see him more. I mean, I think that's the big overriding factor there. When he is on screen, I do like it. I do think that there's some good scenes there. I mean, the intro to that is fantastic. The sequence at the airport, I think, is just fantastic. The final fight with Muto was really good. I really like it. Wish the monster would have been more of a challenge because it doesn't really look like it's the design that would really put up much of a struggle against it. And I mean, I kind of do understand because they made them a pair, but I do enjoy it. The story could probably be streamlined a little, but it's good. I don't consider it great, but I still really enjoy it. I do really like King of the Monsters. I think that one's a lot of fun. Just no nonsense. Just get as much on screen as possible. I agree. I do really like that, and I do like that it does make up for a lot of the lack of screen time. Again, it's not a story that I do think is really that well developed. Maybe take another pass at it. But I do enjoy the evolution of Monarch in there. I do really like the way that they continue them with that. And that is one of the few things that I do really like outside of the monsters in King of the Monsters. Again, it's just another one where I would kind of like a little bit more like an overarching story. Kong is one I haven't had a lot of time to process yet because it's one I didn't see it in the theaters. I didn't see it in theaters, so I kind of had to wait for it to drop on home video. So it's one where I don't have I'm not as familiar with it. I find it a little awkward how they incorporate Skull Island into this, where it kind of retcons a lot of stuff. And it just feels a little weird where they're kind of explaining a bunch of stuff where, Skull Island was just a, infant, like it's, not fully grown yet. And we have to, let this 50-foot monster grow to like 300-foot size. But when they do clash, it's fun. I do like a lot of their battles. The nighttime battle is just fantastic. I think that's in Hong Kong.
Oh yeah, with all like the neon lighting.
The neon lighting. Yeah, I always forget where that one takes place. I think that's Hong Kong.
It's Hong Kong. It is.
Yeah. That battle's fantastic. I really like that, and it does show like they're evenly matched. Mechagodzilla is just, again, it's another one of those where he just feels really awkward and shoehorned into it. I don't think you needed him. I mean, I do understand because you don't want to have a definitive winner between the two, but I don't like the way he just becomes shoehorned in where it's kind of, I mean, I always thought that, the proper way to do it was to have made, tie it in with Pacific Rim and made him like a Jaeger. Like Mechagodzilla was like a Jaeger design. Like I always thought you could have done that and kind of like, tied everything in where, it turns out that all of these, sightings and all of, like you kind of tie it in with like King of the Monsters, where like all of the mutants and all these variant species that are found are beings that came through from the open hole in the Pacific Rim and all that. You could have done that, but I again, it's just a film where I'm not complete. I haven't had as much time to sit with it as the others.
Sorry. I was just gonna say I like how they use Mechagodzilla in it. I did see it in theaters, so that could make a difference too.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know. For me, it just feels weird bringing him up in the third film all of a sudden. Like, you're trying to tie in Skull Island already, and you're connecting the two film. You're collecting the lore from the two films, and then you're bringing Skull Island into the mix. Like, that's already a heavy enough story. Like, now you're introducing like this new threat to them. I mean, I understand the inclusion. It's just one of those where he just feels a little clunky. Again, maybe that can be something that just dissipates over time.
And I do see that for sure. What I like about the MonsterVerse movies is they remind me of the Showa movies, and those are clunky. They're there's like, really, you're gonna do that? But if that results like in seeing, I don't know, crazy ass stuff like Godzilla flying through the air to double kick Megalon, or what we see in the MonsterVerse, like King Ghidorah flying Godzilla up into space and then dropping him. Like there's fun, wacky stuff, especially in King of the Monsters and Godzilla versus Kong, in my opinion. But the reason why I like the inclusion of Mechagodzilla a lot, and you're right, they did have a problem with Godzilla versus Kong, because it's like, you don't want to pick an outright winner. They do. It's Godzilla. Godzilla killed Kong, and then they had to resuscitate him. So Godzilla won, but you can't kill King Kong. Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Not for good, because...
I think I would probably have liked it a little more if he definitively beat him, but not killed him. And then the whole resuscitation thing, that was always a really weird part of the film. I don't know if that would have if getting rid of that would have made it a little better. But I do think that if the two fought and Godzilla came out the clear victory, but he didn't like deliver a KO punch, I don't know if that would have fixed it. Like I said, I don't know either. Yeah.
But the reason why I do like the inclusion of Mechagodzilla is it gives a reason for Godzilla to become a heel again. And in the MonsterVerse, that Godzilla hasn't had that role yet. So when you put the two icons together, one of them has to be a heel. And I think Godzilla is the better choice for that. I think King Kong's always going to be like the easier one to sympathize and root for. And also, I like seeing Godzilla be bad.
I do agree. I do like those. I do like the early Showa more. Mm-hmm. I do like the early ones where he's like the clear bad guy. I do like those a little bit better than him being the hero. Even films like Destroy All Monsters, where he's still himself, but it just so happens that what he's doing benefits mankind. I do like.
Right.
Yeah, I do like the earlier Showa ones, like the first 5 or 6 up until he doesn't really turn until Ghidorah. But I do like the first, 4.5, I guess. I do like those a little bit more. Monster Zero, he's on the way. He's still like, the influence of the aliens helps a lot. We're in the second act where, they send him on the rampage. But it's still one where, as soon as he's out of their control, like the first thing he does is kick the rock at him. So it's kind of like, okay, well, I'm still here to pick the fight. So he's still not completely like the bad guy. And then, like in Destroy All Monsters, again, he's kind of like the bad guy, but he's still doing things that just they inadvertently help mankind.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, the earlier Showa ones are I do enjoy those a lot more. And I like I said, I am a huge fan of the Millennium ones. I know that those are really stupid and awkward, and they all have their own failings, but I do really enjoy those a lot because I do find those really fun. And so yeah, I do think that he probably works a little bit better as the bad guy, but like I said, I don't know if it would be a case where I would probably have to just spend a little bit more time with it and get used to the idea of what it's done here, because the idea is not bad. Yeah, I don't know. Just like the first time I watched it, I always felt like it was just Mechagodzilla was just awkwardly included into the film, because I don't know if you do need to, not kill either one, because you're not going to have Kong and Godzilla kill each other. Like, you're not going to have, right. You're not going to kill either one in the middle of the movie. But yeah, maybe it's just one where I need to, just spend a little bit more time with it and maybe just get used to the idea a little bit more. But I do like the series as a whole. I don't know where we're going with the new one coming later this year.
We're going pink. That's where we're going.
Like I said, I don't know if the color choice is putting me off. I don't know if my lack of experience with the first the first Godzilla versus Kong is one that I need to rectify by the time that arrives. But I like I said, I really enjoy it. I actually enjoy it a little bit more than the last the anime series. I know mm-hmm. I like it better than those. I think the second one again is the best of the three. I don't know their names. I've only seen them once. My friend had a Netflix account and I was mooching off of that, so I've only seen them the once. I'll let you figure out why I've only seen them the once.
Well, I wouldn't be able to guess. I haven't seen any of the animes.
Yeah, they're not bad. The animated style is always one of the big things for me, because I'm not a huge fan of Japanese animation. Mm-hmm. It's always been one where I've never really gotten into it. I'm not an anime fan. I don't watch Crunchyroll. I don't do any of that stuff. So a lot of anime is just really weird to me, and it's kind of not off-putting, but it's just one where I don't actively seek it out. So yeah. the style's kind of awkward, but it's one where I think it fits because the spectacle of the story is much grander than what you could do in live action. And I think that's kind of what I like about it, is that it does go so big, because Godzilla's become so much of a menace, and he's, if you don't know this, the general gist of the storyline, and I'm only going off memory here because I've seen this once. The general gist is that he's become so much of a menace, and he's attacked humanity and, fighting other monsters, but just like, okay, I'm going to, attack the other monsters. But then as soon as I'm done with that, as soon as I kill them, I'm going to, just continue and ravage the city and, destroy the city after I've, accomplished what I started the fight. He's gotten to the point where he's made Earth uninhabitable. And humanity has created this device that allows them to venture into space, and they establish colonies out there. And it's several hundred years after the fact, they decide to come back to Earth to check to see if it's, livable again, and find that not only has, the Earth is acceptable, but it's not ideal. And most of that is because Godzilla has now become, I shudder to use the word gargantuan, but let's just say the size that he is in the Millennium, in the Heisei films, is the biggest he's been on in movies, where he's I think they gave the estimation like 330 feet tall. When they returned to Earth, Godzilla's 900 feet tall.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of like, he's become just, too much to deal with, where Earth may be survivable, but he's still too much. And it just becomes a battle of trying to, survive on the island, survive on Earth long enough to get back to outer space. Again, if I'm missing anything, I apologize. I've seen them the one time, and again, I'm not the biggest anime fan, so it's kind of hard to, get into and gauge what was going on. But I do like the action. I do like the story. I think it's one that's intriguing, but it's also another one where I understand why they did it in anime, because you can't do that kind of storyline in live action. That thing would just cost so much.
Oh, yeah.
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 And then real quickly, I'm actually not a huge fan of Shin Godzilla. I don't really find that one all that interesting.
A lot of people like that one.
I know, like I said, it's kind of weird. I have a specific reason why. It's because I call this the Neon Evangelion Godzilla, and I don't like Neon Genesis. I don't like Evangelion. To me, I understand the appeal. I do. I genuinely like. I do genuinely get the appeal of what's going on, but I've never liked the idea of Godzilla standing in one location, firing up to max power, and in one location destroying the city in one location. Like I know that that's a little that symbolizes his connection with the atomic bomb and all that much clearer than anything that they've ever done. But he's always been, to me, he's always been more like the shockwave of the bomb rather than just the singular point of detonation where he moves slowly and it's the rippling effect of him slowly approaching. And that to me has always been what I like most about him, is that he's always charging forward instead of just standing still and powering up and just letting the beam fly. That's never been what I like about him. And that's what I don't like about Shin, is that that's essentially what he does, is he stands in one spot, fires up to the maximum, and then lets the beam go and then just obliterates Tokyo in one go, instead of rampaging through the city and using his body, his mass, his lashing out and physically doing that city by row by row by row by row and doing it that way, rather than just, well, I'm going to stand here, power up, and be lazy and just fire the beam and blow half the city away at once. That to me has never been like the essence of the character. I know that evokes the atomic bomb much closer because that's actually what it did, but it's just the actions have just never been what I appreciate Godzilla to be, and that's always the one reason why I've never really been a big fan of that one.
That's fair. I do appreciate that it is a very different take on Godzilla, and then I also appreciate that we only have one Shin Godzilla.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like it as a one-off.
Yeah. Yeah, that does give it a little bit of uniqueness, because it doesn't really feel like a reboot necessarily. It feels more like this weird timeline where it's just the one. So yeah, I do like that. And I mean, again, it's another one where again, it ties back into the original and kind of uses the original as a launching point. But again, it just, everything about the movie is fine. I like the spectacle. I like the action. Yeah. I like the commentary on politics is not that interesting because I'm not Japanese and I wasn't around when the Fukushima erupted, so that kind of stuff's not really that interesting. But I do enjoy the central core of the story. I do like the way it ties into the original. I do like the spectacle of the evolution of Godzilla, because it's one where you never see his evolution at all. It's one of the only ones, and Godzilla -1 does it as well to a slight degree, but it's one where you never see him evolve and you never see like the stages of life. You see that in his opponents. You see that in Hidora.
Like
you see that, Orga.
Mothra. You
see it. Hidora. You see it. Destoroyah. You see it. You see like an evolution.
Biollante, right?
Oh, Biollante, another one, yeah. So yeah, you do see you see that evolution take place in the opponents, but you don't see it in him. And I do like the way that we treat him. We do treat Godzilla in that sense throughout the film, where you see the various stages. Like the one that comes ashore and the second form that kind of attacks, and then you finally get the big massive 300-foot tall skyscraper being at the very end. But it's always been just the way that they treat him, and that's always kind of been like the one thing that kind of turns me off to it the most. Again, the politics is another issue, but that was always my takeaway against it when I first saw it, and it's always been one that's kind of lingered with me ever since. But that's always kind of why I've never really been a big fan of Shin. I don't know if you've seen -1, but
yes.
Yeah, okay, awesome. So yeah, -1.
We got to move on to -1. I mean, that's kind of like the big thing right now, the thing people are really excited about, which when this episode drops, we're going to be in that halfway point between -1's release, and I think people are still, going to be excited about that. And then the release of the new Godzilla versus Kong.
Because I think they're going to try to, I don't know if it's been officially announced yet, but I think they're probably going to try to do the black and white version to try to capitalize on the new Kong one. I am so intrigued by that. I mean, I can't wait to see what that first attack in the jungle is going to look like. I can't wait to see the first time he unleashes his breath in Tokyo. I think that is just going to look absolutely jaw-dropping. I don't know how you feel about it. I mean, for me, it may be my favorite. I would need, again, more time with it, but I absolutely love the hell out of that thing. I was just engrossed from beginning to end. Amazing characters, amazing special effects, just absolutely jaw-dropping action, and I absolutely love just the two main characters in here. I was just completely on board with everything. Like I said, it may be my favorite, but I just need more time with it.
I also love the movie a lot. It's one of my favorites of the year. I can't say it is my favorite Godzilla movie. I think I'll always have a special place in my heart for Mothra versus Godzilla. But that being said, it may I've not seen all the Godzilla movies in a long time, but I wouldn't argue if anyone said it's the best one. I'd be like, maybe. I'd have to think. I don't think there's a lot of other contenders for like the best Godzilla movie. I do think Godzilla -1 could take that honor
Yeah.
easily.
Well, like I said, it's always the distinction between best or favorite.
Right.
Because for me, favorite is, and this may be kind of weird, my favorite to just chill out and watch is Tokyo SOS.
That's a good one, though. I think that's a good one.
Like I said, Tokyo SOS is one that I actually really, really like, and it's one that I enjoy watching the most. But I think if we go by best, then I think it's the original Mothra versus Godzilla and then -1. So
I wouldn't argue with that ranking at all.
yeah, like I said, it's always one where you want to differentiate between best and favorite, because favorite is when, I know Tokyo SOS is, really good, but I know that there's a lot of, issues with it. But it's one that I for some reason that one just clicks for me, and I really like it, and it always holds up whenever I rewatch it. But then it's, like I said, it's got its issues, and it's, not really like that good of a movie. But then, you look at, Mothra versus Godzilla, you look at, the original, or, if you want to watch the American version, that's fine. Because I've always said the American version is more entertaining, but the Japanese version is the better movie.
I feel that.
I think if you look at the Japanese version, Mothra versus Godzilla -1, I think those are like the best well made. Like if you were to like analyze everything critically and look at it like, with like an analytical lens, I think those are the ones that hold up. But then, I have absolutely no issue with somebody saying, like Megalon is like their favorite because it's one that, they saw as a kid, it was like their introduction. It was one that, they saw all the time, and they were like really on board with, Godzilla the Protector and Godzilla the Hero. And, like there's like a sentimental reason why it's one that it's always like a favorite, but deep down it's, not that good. So I know that there's always like the distinction between the two is like, which was the best and which one's your favorite. So
I am a stan for Godzilla versus Megalon. I'm a Godzilla versus Megalon defender. If there are 10,000 Godzilla versus Megalon fans, I am one of them. If there are 10 Godzilla versus Megalon fans, I am one of them. If there's only one Godzilla versus Megalon fan, it is me. And if there are no Godzilla versus Megalon fans, then I am not on this earth.
I will say it's better than its reputation. I do actually come to its defense as well. I don't say it's, upper echelon, but I actually do enjoy parts of it. I actually do really like, there are parts to it that I actually do really enjoy. And I do enjoy just, the kitschy nature of it. Just the sheer balls to the wall insanity. It does have its moments, and again, it's one where you have Gigan in there, so it automatically can't suck just because Gigan is awesome.
I love Gigan. Gigan's so weird.
Yeah,
he was also my go-to in Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee.
God, I haven't played that in here. I haven't played that in so long. Yeah.
Such a fun game.
That was wild. I remember playing that. I don't remember who had it. It was one of my friends who had it because I didn't really grow up with video games that much. But I had a friend of mine who had that, and I remember I actually tolerated him just because I was able to go over to his house and play that.
You know
I
what?
remember playing that.
Sometimes it be that way.
Yeah, and when we kind of like grew apart, it was kind of like, well, I was playing the game, but yeah, you say that. I remember playing that game a lot. I don't remember if I ever really played it with Gigan. For me, my go-to was always Anguirus. I always played with him because I was always like an Anguirus defender because, God, that poor guy has just had it so bad. I mean, he's the first one that's killed. You look at what happens in, we talked about him getting his jaw ripped out.
Yep.
And, in Gigan, he gets his head split open. And then you always forget, and this is the one that I always it's the one thing the one thing in Destroy All Monsters that I always really liked is that he's the one that Ghidorah flies off with him chomping on his neck. He drops him from midair, so he like falls like 500 or 600 feet, crashes to the ground, and then gets up. And it's only when Ghidorah lands on him and he like stomps on him that knocks him out. And I was always one of those where it's like I love his spirit. I've always enjoyed the way Anguirus approaches it because he's the one that actually charges it. He's the one that actually charges the Ghidorah when he lands. It's like he doesn't even wait for him to be on the ground. Like, he charges at him and, he gets the first, volley of the gravity beams. But that was always like the way that he was treated in Destroy All Monsters made me a fan of Anguirus. And that was always my guy. And he was always the one that I played on Destroy All Monsters mainly. I always used Anguirus just because I always wanted to right the wrongs of his treatment in the movies. He was always my guy. That was always my favorite.
I would always pick Gigan for a much simpler reason, because that dude was weird as fuck. And he was so fun to play, because he'd like spin around and, use this buzzsaw, and he had like a really cool laser eye, and then his hands are basically scythes. He doesn't make sense, and neither did my playing style, so it just worked. But I really liked playing with Godzilla because, like, obviously.
Of course, yeah, I did too.
Exactly. And then I always thought King Ghidorah was fun.
I never played as him. I don't remember ever, because I distinctly remember I always chose the good guys. I never chose the bad guys to play as. I think the only one I ever played at as a bad guy was Mechagodzilla, because I always wanted to like be the defender and actually like use him as like the protector of mankind. I do remember playing him once, but I don't remember ever playing as the bad guys because I was always like, I want to be like the protector and like defender version. Like I always wanted to like do that storyline more than like playing the one that destroys everything. But yeah, I do remember playing Mechagodzilla once, and I think that was like the only time I ever really played as the bad guy. I never played as like the bad monsters really.
But that game was so much fun. I got two more questions for you, one of which I think you already know what's coming. But before I ask the titular question of the show, I'm just curious. Do you have a favorite Godzilla design? And if so, what is it?
It's probably 89 or 91 because it's the same costume.
Fair.
Yeah. For some reason, I've always just enjoyed it. It kind of just encapsulates, I think, the idea of Godzilla as this just unstoppable, imposing menace. To use modern vernacular, he's thick with multiple C's. But he doesn't look fat. He looks, just beefy and bulky and ripped. The face looks amazing. I always kind of love that, like that small angular triangle, like that small face look that he has, where you don't really want to, like mess with him. But at the same time, it does kind of have like this dinosaur look to him. He looks just distinctive. And I actually do really enjoy both movies. But like I said, I've always really liked 89, 91. Honorable mentions, I would probably say Mothra versus Godzilla. I like those. He's slimmed down. He's muscular. He's kind of got those just dark, malevolent eyes to him. Great look with the head. I kind of always liked that look. And for an offshoot, I always think this one's an underrated look. Godzilla Millennium or Megaguirus, because again, it's another one where they use the same look. I've always really liked that one. Again, he's kind of got that, heavy, bulky, like thick look to him. The spikes look really amazing. but he's got that really weird mouth thing where his mouth is just a little too big, so he kind of makes like weird movements when he's like roaring in aggression or like ready to charge. And it kind of just he looks really distinctive, and I always kind of like really like the way he looks in those. So I've always like I think like the best one is always the 8991, and like the underrated one is always the Godzilla 2000 or Megaguirus one.
I think those are great picks, and I don't think it could go wrong with the Godzilla design. They're all great in their own way. It just kind of depends on your tastes. But now it is time. If you, this could go a lot of different ways because there's a lot of different versions of Godzilla. Well, actually, I think the answer is the same for all the different versions of Godzilla. But if you happen to be in Tokyo when Godzilla rolls up on it, would you die?
Eventually, I would probably shit myself.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably rub my eyes to make sure it's not an illusion.
Fair.
And I would probably look to see where he's running, where he's going, and then not necessarily go in the opposite direction, but I would probably go in a diagonal direction.
Yeah, just kind of increase your odds.
Yeah, I would probably try to get as far away as possible. But the other thing is that I'm well aware of the fact that I'm not athletic. I don't have very good stamina. And ever since the pandemic, my cardio is shit. So I'm probably gonna. It's something I'm working on, I know, but I'm being honest with myself. I don't have the physique of an Olympian. I don't have the stamina of anybody that's gonna, run away very fast, and I'm not gonna, last too long running a marathon. So, like I said, my cardio is really crap. So I'm probably not gonna get very far, especially with him being maybe 300 times my size. He could probably cover more distance than I could. Like I said, depending on how close I am to Tokyo Bay when he arrives. But I'll give myself good odds and say I would probably be smart enough to get with a crowd that would run away the second they saw him, and maybe make it to safety. But I will say that there may be a slight chance that I'll probably get crushed or burned to death or something, just to play safe and play my odds. But I'm also gonna give myself a fighting chance and say if I'm far enough away, I'll probably make it to safety. But I will be honest and give myself a few slight chances that I won't make it.
The thing with Godzilla, and whenever Godzilla is a topic on this show, what makes Godzilla hard to answer this question is he's not like Mikey My My or the Xenomorph or Freddy Krueger, where it's like it's 1v1, they're coming after you. Yeah, you're probably going to get it. Godzilla don't care about us. So he's not actively trying to Godzilla -1. That one was a motherfucker. But for the most part, Godzilla's not actively trying to kill. He's just doing his thing. We don't really know his motivations a lot of the time. It's just really luck of the draw. You could start getting away and making a distance, but he uses his atomic breath once in the direction you happen to be in. It doesn't matter how far you went.
Right, yeah.
So it's really just luck.
I've always said that one of the interesting things I would want to do is make a lane. Like, okay, you get out of the streets and you get out of the city, and you just stand there and you let him pass by, and you see what he does. Like, is he actually gonna crush the building to step on you, or is he gonna just continue on his path, not killing you, but he's doing his own thing and he's gonna keep on going. And, the fact that we're actually running puts us in more danger than if we actually stand still and just let him do his thing.
Right. It's really just luck, I think.
Yeah.
Where are you when he pulls up? Where you're able to go, and then just kind of keeping a watchful eye and hope he doesn't turn around.
Exactly, yeah.
And then if there's another monster in play, like King Ghidorah or something,
right.
That just lessens the odds. Why is he there? Is he trying to wreak havoc, or is he trying to save the world? It doesn't matter. Just try and be out of the way.
Yeah, give him his lane. But like I said, that's kind of like my thing was give him his lane and see what he does. get out of the way, like, not necessarily like leave the city, but just like stand off to the side and see where he goes. Yeah, that's always something that I've always been kind of like curious to see if like, if that would actually work, if that would do something. But yeah, I think just the fact that seeing a 300-foot tall fire-breathing lizard moving through the city, a couple 100 feet away from you, I'm not going to want to take my chances. I'm going to want to move. But yeah, there's also that other part of me. It's like, well, if we don't do anything, is he actually going to do something to us? So it's kind of, so yeah, it's one of those where I don't know if I want to test the theory, but it'd be interesting to see play out.
It's one of the harder ones to answer because there's so many variables, but I think we'll do okay. We know the big G. And everyone listening knows we know the big G pretty well. So this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for joining me today. I could keep going, but we're both busy horror creators. We got a lot of stuff going on, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time. But where can the people find you and your work?
Yeah, okay. So I do movie reviews for Don's World of Horror and Exploitation. Pretty much anything I see that I want to, falls into that range. You can find it on there. Site is donshorrorworld.blogspot.com. And I do host a couple of podcasts. I do host, mainly for me, the Horror Countdown, which I guess we can spill the beans, is that you're involved in one of the latest episodes by the time you hear this. It's pretty much a pretty simple format. We pick a topic, we formulate a top 10 list around it, and we get together and discuss it. So it's all lists all the time. We don't do reviews or breakdowns. We just pick topics and top 10 lists. So if you're interested in that, you can find us pretty much everywhere online. I've got to get used to stop saying Google Podcasts because that's gone by now. Spotify, Apple. I guess it's, out there if you want to, use your Pocket Cat, your podcatcher of choice. Nobody's ever complained about not being able to find it, so it's out there. It's pretty easy to find. It's Horror Countdown. That's me. You can find me there, and I do host two others with friends of mine. One is No More Room in Hell presents Fresh Cuts, which is basically just a look at the latest releases, theatrical, streaming, VOD. We pick one movie a week, the, biggest, tentpole release, whatever format it is, and we break it down and review it. And I also do another show called No More Room in Hell presents Creature Comforts, which is basically we pick a monster movie or creature feature and discuss it. Nice. So with those, they are both sidecasts under the No More Room in Hell banner. So they don't have specific feeds. But if you follow No More Room in Hell, or if you follow darkdiscussions.com, they'll be right there and available. And especially in those cases, since they appear more often than No More Room in Hell, you'll find more of them. But they don't have their own separate feed, so you will have to follow No More Room in Hell. But they do show up. They do show up in that feed. So yes, it's pretty much everywhere you can find me. I'm Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. It should be pretty easy. I'm out there. I go by my name pretty much everywhere. And if I don't, everything is linked back under my name. So I'm pretty easy to find.
Awesome. Everyone go follow Don. He's great. Obviously, you guys just heard huge conversation about God. Well, there's only one way to have a conversation about Godzilla, and it's got to be huge, right?
Exactly.
Thank you so much for joining me. And yeah, guys, don't forget, I'm going to be on Don's show. I think, we should be releasing the same week. So that's a fun conversation. We already recorded that one.
Right. I will keep the topic under wraps, but like I said, as based as the conversation that we had there, I knew that this was going to be a lot of fun. So if you enjoyed this, you will know what kind of shenanigans to expect on the other one. So hope to see you there.
All righty. Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Thanks again to Don for joining me today and geeking out about Godzilla with me. Godzilla is one of my favorite things to talk about, so I had a blast with this one. Those of you in the East Lansing area, check out my short film Ice Cream at the Lake Michigan Film Festival. It is playing this Saturday, March 2nd, 2024 at 8:45 p.m. during the Dark Short Films block over at Studio C in East Lansing. I plan on being there, and I hope to see you there as well. The Patreon is back. That's right. If you really want to support this podcast, you can help me directly by subscribing to my Patreon. I retooled it so it's only $3 a month, and you get exclusive content as well as live streams for patrons only. If you like this show, please let me know. Leave a review and rate on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you listen to this show. Also, feel free to interact with me on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you're most comfortable. It may not seem like a lot, but trust me, every single like, share, comment, follow, all of that stuff really helps this podcast grow and helps keep me going. And feel free to let me know how I'm doing. What do you guys like about the show? What are some areas I can improve? Guests you'd like me to have on? Monsters or topics you want me to talk about? Just let me know what you guys think. A reminder, I just became an affiliate for FANGORIA, one of the premier brands in horror. I definitely recommend checking out their magazine and even subscribing. And if you decide to do that, don't forget to use the promo code WoodYouDieShow for 20% off your entire order. You can find the show's social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at WoodYouDieShow. Also now you can follow me on TikTok at WoodYouDiePodcast. Would You Die is a partner with the Three Wise Men Media, a Metro Detroit-based group of awesome guys Kyle, Tyler, and Dylan, where they bring you professional wrestling, indie comic books, and so much more. The music you hear in the beginning and end of each episode is composed by my friend Josie Palmer. Next week, we're diving into a Stephen King classic that has not been discussed yet on this show. Until next time, I'm Austin Torres. Try not to die.